The security camera in the living room had been recording for hours, capturing nothing but an empty couch and the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. But at 3:47 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, it captured something that would change the Morrison family forever. What started as an adorable moment between a toddler and her dog quickly became something no one could have predicted. The footage was so remarkable that when Sarah Morrison checked it later that evening, she had to watch it 3 times before she could believe what she was seeing. If you want to see what happens next in this incredible true story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another amazing moment like this one. 2-year-old Emma Morrison had always been small for her age. With her wispy blonde hair that never quite stayed in its ponytail, and her big blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around her, she looked like she belonged in a storybook. But what Emma lacked in size, she more than made up for in personality. Her parents often joked that she had been born with the confidence of a CEO and the determination of a world-class athlete. The Morrison family lived in a spacious suburban home in Portland, Oregon, where they had moved just 6 months earlier. The house came with a large backyard, which was one of the main reasons they had chosen it. They knew their Siberian Husky, Apollo, would need the space to run and play. Apollo was a magnificent dog, with the classic gray and white coat and piercing blue eyes that Huskies are famous for. At 3 years old and weighing in at 75 pounds, he was an impressive sight, especially when standing next to tiny Emma. Sarah and her husband David had been hesitant about having such a large dog around their toddler, but Apollo had proven to be exceptionally gentle. From the day they brought Emma home from the hospital, Apollo had appointed himself as her guardian. He would sleep outside her nursery door, follow her from room to room, and always position himself between her and any perceived danger, even if that danger was just the mailman dropping off packages. On that particular Tuesday, Sarah had been working from home in her upstairs office. David was at his job downtown, and Emma was supposed to be having her afternoon quiet time. Sarah had set Emma up in the living room with her coloring books and crayons, given her a sippy cup of apple juice, and turned on some soft music. Apollo, as always, had settled himself on the floor next to Emma, his massive head resting on his paws, watching her with those intelligent blue eyes. The security camera continued its silent watch. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal. Emma colored happily, occasionally showing her pictures to Apollo, who would lift his head and seem to examine them with great seriousness before giving her hand a gentle lick of approval. But then, at exactly 3:47 p.m., Apollo did something unusual. He stood up, walked over to the couch, and in one smooth motion jumped up onto the cushions. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but in the Morrison household, there was one very clear rule that Apollo knew well: no dogs on the couch. The Morrisons had spent months training Apollo to stay off the couch, and he had been perfectly obedient about it, until this moment. Emma noticed immediately. She put down her crayon and turned to look at Apollo, who had made himself comfortable on the couch cushions. The little girl stood up, put her hands on her hips, and walked over to the couch. What happened next was captured in perfect detail by the security camera. "Emma,"
said Emma, in her high-pitched toddler voice, wagging her finger at the massive dog. "That is very bad. You know the rules. No puppies on the couch." The contrast was almost comical. Here was this tiny child, barely 3 feet tall, scolding a dog that outweighed her by more than 60 pounds. Apollo looked at her, his ears perked forward, his head tilted slightly to the side in that characteristic way that huskies have when they're processing information. "Get down right now," Emma commanded, pointing at the floor with all the authority her 2-year-old self could muster. But Apollo didn't move. Instead, he did something that made Emma stop in her tracks. He let out a low whine and shifted his position on the couch, moving to the very edge of the cushion closest to Emma. Then he did it again, a slightly more urgent whine this time. Emma's expression changed from stern to confused. She took a step closer to Apollo, and that's when the dog did something extraordinary. He gently took the sleeve of Emma's pink dress in his mouth, not biting or pulling hard, just holding it carefully between his teeth. Then he tugged, ever so gently, trying to pull her toward the couch. Before we continue our story, let's take just 5 seconds. If this story is touching your heart, please press the like button. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us because many more beautiful stories are coming. Thank you, my dear friend. Now, let us continue. "Apollo, no," Emma said, but her voice had lost its scolding tone. She sounded uncertain now, maybe even a little worried. The big husky released her sleeve and jumped down from the couch. But instead of staying on the floor, as Emma had commanded, he immediately jumped back up, then down again, then up again. He repeated this behavior 3 times, each time looking directly at Emma, his whines becoming more insistent. On the security footage, you could see Emma's little face scrunched up in concentration, trying to understand what her dog was telling her. And then, in a moment that would later make Sarah Morrison's blood run cold, Emma seemed to make a decision. She reached up toward the couch, and Apollo immediately positioned himself to help her climb up. Once Emma was on the couch next to him, Apollo did something that had never been seen in the Morrison household before. He took Emma's arm gently in his mouth again and pulled her closer to him, then positioned his large body between her and the back of the couch, essentially pinning her against the armrest. To anyone watching without context, it might have looked alarming, but Apollo's movements were careful and deliberate, never rough or aggressive. And then he went completely still, covering Emma with his body as much as he could, his head resting protectively over her lap. Emma, confused but trusting her beloved dog, settled into the position, stroking Apollo's soft fur. "Okay, Apollo," she said softly, "we can break the rules together." For 37 seconds, nothing else happened. The security camera showed just a little girl and her dog cuddled together on the couch, breaking a house rule in the most innocent way possible. And then it happened. The entire house began to shake. On the security footage, you could see the picture frames on the walls start to rattle. The lamp on the side table began to sway dangerously. The floor itself seemed to ripple like water. Portland, Oregon was experiencing a magnitude 5.8 earthquake, the strongest to hit the area in over a decade. The shaking lasted for 23 seconds, though it felt much longer. During those terrifying moments, Apollo pressed himself even more firmly against Emma, using his body as a shield. His position on the couch meant that when the large bookshelf in the corner of the room began to tilt, none of its contents fell anywhere near Emma. The heavy decorative vase that had been on the mantel crashed to the floor exactly where Emma had been sitting just minutes before, shattering into dozens of pieces. Through it all, Apollo didn't move from his protective position, keeping Emma safe under his larger frame. Upstairs, Sarah felt the earthquake hit and immediately scrambled out of her office chair, her heart pounding as she thought of Emma downstairs. She half ran, half stumbled down the stairs, calling her daughter's name. The shaking stopped just as she reached the bottom of the staircase. The living room was a mess. Books had fallen from the shelves, the vase was in pieces on the hardwood floor, and there, on the couch, was Emma, protected by 75 pounds of loyal Siberian Husky. "Emma!" Sarah cried out, rushing over. Apollo lifted his head and moved aside, allowing Sarah to scoop her daughter into her arms. "Mama, Apollo made me get on the couch. He was very bossy." Sarah held her daughter tight, her eyes filling with tears as she looked at Apollo. The dog sat calmly, looking at Sarah with those intelligent blue eyes. It was only later that Sarah remembered the security camera. She pulled up the footage and started watching. When she saw Apollo jump on the couch, she expected typical misbehavior. But as she watched the rest, understanding dawned. Apollo had known. Somehow the dog had sensed the earthquake coming minutes before it hit. Dogs are known for their ability to detect seismic activity before humans can feel it. But Apollo hadn't just sensed the earthquake, he had formulated a plan. He deliberately broke a rule to get Emma's attention, communicated urgency, and positioned Emma in the safest possible place, using his own body as a shield. Sarah watched the footage 3 times, crying harder each time. When David came home, having heard about the earthquake, Sarah handed him her phone. David watched in silence. When it ended, he knelt down and wrapped his arms around Apollo's neck. "Good boy," he whispered. "Such a good boy." The Morrisons called their veterinarian that evening. Dr. Patricia Chen explained that dogs can detect subtle changes that precede earthquakes. But the remarkable thing is not just that Apollo sensed the earthquake, it's that he understood the danger and took action to protect Emma. That shows extraordinary intelligence combined with deep emotional bonds. The story quickly spread through their neighborhood. The security footage was viewed millions of times online. Animal behavior experts contacted the Morrisons. Apollo became a local celebrity, though he seemed unbothered, content to continue watching over Emma. The Morrisons made one significant change to their household rules. From that day forward, Apollo was allowed on the couch whenever he wanted. The story of Apollo and Emma serves as a powerful reminder of the extraordinary bond between humans and dogs and the incredible capabilities our canine companions possess. It reminds us to pay attention when our pets act unusually, as they might be trying to tell us something important. If this incredible true story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing animal stories.
Drop a comment below telling us about your own pets and how they've surprised you. Share this video with friends and family and ring that notification bell so you never miss our next video.